as I've kind of thought about what some of the skills, human skill sets that are needed in the world today, that may have traditionally been attached to the feminine or more readily available or tapped into by women, I think about intuition and wisdom, and that intuitive wisdom, that knowing, partnership, collaboration, having sort of a worldview that embraces oneness.
Yes. Well, you know, when you think of what we have had to do, while the men have been out as the warriors and the builders and the providers, the women have been giving birth and nurturing the children, I mean, over and beyond any other social structures. And that creates all these traits. In other words, women must be selected for the capability of nurturing, of caring for all the children, of a certain degree of unconditional love and lack of selfishness, because you can't be a mother unless you can release that selfish quality. And I think what's happened is we have fewer children, that very quality is going into the development of the authentic feminine self. You see, I've had 5 children. So there was the first motherhood, and I was within 1950s, so I was in that older generation. Then out comes this individual vocation. I want to be a communicator, I want to do all this. So I went through a second motherhood, and I've been mothering the authentic feminine self. Then I noticed this authentic feminine self wants to nurture the world, because the world isn't viable or sustainable the way it is. So then you get to be mothering the larger community, and that brings in the need for the fathering. It's a very lovely image that the fathering in the time of pregnancy and birth has to be supporting the woman giving birth in order for his progeny to go on. And there's a period where the men seem to be, the very best of them, willing not only to do their own work, but to be really nurturing and supportive of the feminine. Now, it's not easy for men to do that, because the entire structure that they've been brought up in, and their fathers have been brought in, is exactly the opposite. And I have a huge amount of compassion for the evolution of the man, because he's going against the structures that his parents trained him in. And the structures are still holding where so-called power exists. And if he is feeling that quality within himself, it's easier for a woman to come forward that way than for a man. So I think the men have to be, in a way, there's a new heroism in the man, if you want to put it that way.
It's a courage.
It's a courage, and it's a heroic courage in the male that come forward out of the structures into the co-creation of the new structure with the feminine, who are no longer just wanting to get their equality or angry, but actually wanting to partner. So what we have here is a new mix, a wonderful, very, very creative mix.
You know, it's interesting, as I was listening to you speak this morning too around evolution, and my experience, and I've been asked this recently, was that gender equality and the balance of male and female was a truth that I had. I grew up in the 70s in the Deep South, and it wasn't most people's truth.
No.
And so when people ask me, you know, where did you come from? You know, I'll say, you know, I just was born knowing that this was true. And I'm wondering, after listening to you, if there's some piece of that we're being seeded in an evolutionary way with some of this truth, so that because that's how, for me, I know to embrace it and to go into action with it, is because I know it's true. If I didn't believe it, then I couldn't.
So you're saying it's more innate?
It's innate.
Innate. I really believe there is an evolution of the person here. And that there's a certain, you might say, I call them a communion of pioneering souls. I have found there are pioneering souls who are incarnating this innately in every field, every discipline, every age, every color, every sex. and that it is innate. And you know, I think of what happened with from Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo Neanderthal, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens sapiens. I believe that out of this Homo sapiens sapiens, self-reflective consciousness, is coming Homo noeticus, Homo universalis, Homo synergistic, wherein we are innately attracted to a consciousness that is empathetic, connected, somewhat multidimensional, cosmic. It comes out of the understanding of cosmic evolution too. That, I mean, we know that we're born into a multidimensional living universe, and these are innate knowings that if you're in the right culture can be cultivated in you. Like I was not born in that culture. I was born in a Jewish, agnostic, materialistic business family in New York City, and told I was an American, get out there and do your best and win. Win. And mainly as a girl, I remember my father said, don't be too bright, you won't get a good husband.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and there was some truth to, I mean, from, you know, it's interesting because I think a lot of women and still continue to be told to portray something that betrays themselves.
Betray, yes. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, that's very, very true. And here is another deeper truth that I've struggled in every relationship I've had in my life, is that when, it's not just being bright, but when the woman gets vocationally aroused with the passion to give birth to her own expression, it's very hard on the man. See, this is different than the men coming forward with their feminine, all that. If the man loves a woman and she becomes vocationally aroused, she gains so much passion for what she wants to express that it is very hard on the man. I have affected every relationship that every man I've ever loved was wounded to the degree that I was so passionately aroused. And of course, I'm of the older generation. The younger men are more aware that the women are going to be this way.
Yes.
And the women don't have to fight for it. So is it easier in your generation?
Well, not having the context of both, I think that it probably is easier of what I've observed, but I still think there's ultimately, as men are going through this evolution, this sort of emasculating feeling that I think they're taught to feel if they're not the ones that are those creators, the preeminent creator in the duo. And so if there's something that I think still can occur as men figure out what our role is in this, so we can say it's okay for us to support and be in a place of holding, you know, growth, and not having to compete.
That is extremely challenging. And what I've noticed as not only myself, but so many women are afraid when they express, it's not a competitive urge as so much as it is an expressive urge. They're afraid if they go the whole way in expressing it, they'll lose the men they love. And many women who are evolutionary women are alone because they have lost the men. That is to say, either the man can't stand it or the woman leaves him. And but when the women I know who are like this all long for deep relationships, not necessarily marriage. In fact, marriage itself, in certainly the older wedlock bonds of marriage. Can you imagine those words?
Yes.
I mean, I know people write new vows, but you know, Jesus, when asked, said that there's no marrying in heaven. I wondered about that.
That's very interesting.